Going back to the reference, we're now going to be making these little pillars, windows, and what looks like a drain pipe, which for a desert doesn't seem that useful, but maybe it is for something else. And these are really good ways to break up the repetition of modular pieces just by putting something over them. It can also be a really good way to hide seams. So let's say this drain pipe that goes all the way from the top to the bottom is right over where two modular pieces come together. It'll be much harder to see if there is a seam in the texturing. Pillars, wall panels, and stuff like that are really good ways of hiding some errors that are difficult to get rid of. So I have my modular pieces, and I'm just going to lay them out for now. Have them in a line. Move them back. And I'll start making the pillar, which is a fairly easy thing to make. It is more or less a cube. I'm going to hold down X to center it, and move my pivot point to the bottom, and snap it up to the grid. I'm going to scale it inwards a bit and make it a little bit taller. And I'm going to delete the faces that I am not going to see, which are the back and the bottom. On the pillar, it is tapered a little bit, so I'm going to select that top edge and drag it inwards a little bit. And I might want to make the bottom one come out a little bit more. In object mode, I'm going to hit Control B. That's going to bevel everything. And since the geometry is very simple and I deleted everything I did not want, I can get away with beveling the entire model and then rounding it out. And that's all I'm going to do for that piece. It is, like I said, a pretty simple, mostly beveled cube. And I'll put it off to the side for now. And next I'm going to make the window, which is a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to start with the cube. And I'm going to place it on the wall, roughly in the position where I want it. So I think my wall is a little bit more slanted than the reference, which is fine. And just like before, I'm going to delete the pieces that I'm not going to see, which right now is only a back face. I am going to move those vertices inwards a little bit, just so I don't have so much geometry that's not being used on the inside. And the first thing I want to do is round out the top. They are rounded windows. So I'm going to use the multi-cut and put in an edge loop, holding down Control and Shift at the halfway point. And selecting the very top of the new edge that I just made, I'm going to hit W and move it up. So instead of making a rounded top, I just made a pointed one. But with bevel, it'll be very easy to fix. I'm going to double click on the center edge and go to bevel, increase the fraction a bit, and increase the segments to round it out. I now have a nice rounded piece of geometry, and I'm going to select all of the front faces, extrude, and offset them inwards. And then I can extrude again and extrude straight back to make it look like there is a window. You can definitely do some more beveling to this object. I'm going to select that outside edge loop and bevel it. You could do the inside as well. And again, it's really dependent on what your poly count is and how important this window is. For us, it is a fake window, and I think I made that way too big. I'm just going to scale it down a little bit. So now I have a window that fits nicely right here. One thing that's really important is the pivot point for this window. Right now the pivot point is right here, just in the center of the object, and if I had a lot of these walls, it would be a little bit difficult to get it in the exact same place on all of them. So I'm going to move my pivot point down to the corner of the wall. So when I duplicate, I can very easily snap it to the wall's pivot, or to the wall, and it will always be in the exact same spot. So now I have a kind of a half pillar and a window. They are both modular. And the last thing I want to make for this is the drain pipe. Actually, it might be second to last. And there's a lot of different ways that we could do this. And I'm going to show you a method that we've already done. I'm going to make a NURB circle and extrude on a curve, but I'm going to use a tool that we didn't use before. Right now, if I just started to make a curve, it would be very difficult to get it to adhere to this wall, because if I clicked, it would go right through the wall and go on the grid. So before I get into the curve tool, I'm going to select my wall and come up here to the magnets. And we've actually been using these magnets a lot. If you hold down X, you'll notice the first one highlights, and that is snap to grid. The third one is snap to point, which is also snap to vertex. And the last one says make the selected object live, and right next to it, it says no live surface. With the wall selected, I'm going to select the far right magnet. It will now say P-plane 3 because that's what my object is called. And I won't be able to select it. You'll notice that the wireframe is a different shade. It is now green instead of blue. And when I open up my curve tool, does not matter which one, it is now going to stick to the wall. This can be a really good way to do cables or vines growing over a building, and for us, a little drain pipe. I'm going to start anywhere on the top, and I want it to be roughly a straight line, but it won't be perfect. And I can't just have one curve, or one point right here for where it is curving. I do need to have a few more points to hold the geometry to actually make it a nice curve. And then I'm going to come down. And I do want to make it a little bit simpler. I don't want the pipe to have all the same curves and bevels. So I'll go about halfway and then jump down here. Oops. Or about right there. Come down further. I'm going to ignore kind of this area right here and go right over it. Come down. And for this one, it will continue its nice curve. And then down to the bottom. So obviously this is not a straight line. And it's very easy to fix. All you have to do is hit R to scale. I'm going to center my pivot and then scale it to the center. You can overscale, which is not something you can usually do, but generally with curves you can. So I'm just going to drag it roughly to the center and make it straight. I'm going to turn off live mode, so I'm just going to click on the magnet. I can now select my wall as I normally could. And I'm going to move my curve outwards a little bit. Since I'm going to have geometry around this, I don't want it intersecting the wall. And I do need to make a few changes. I need to make this a little bit taller, so I have the control point selected, and it's going to move them up and move this one back. And I'm just giving a buffer from the curve from the wall. And we'll need to do the same thing down here. I'm going to select all of these points and move them slightly up. I now have a curve that fits my wall pretty well, and I'm going to create a NURBS circle. It does not matter where the circle is in the scene. It's going to put it over here so it's out of my way. And I'm going to select the circle and then shift click on the curve. It can be sometimes tricky to select the curve, So you can also hold down Shift or Control and select it from the outliner. And under Surfaces, Extrude, and make sure your options box are set correctly. You should have all of these on the right, polygons, and control points, and hit Apply. It's going to be way too big, so I'm going to take that NURB circle and scale it down. And now it's looking pretty good. It is intersecting the wall a little bit, but not enough that will be noticeable. You can always make it a little bit smaller if you need to, or modify the curve. So I'm going to select the curve from the outliner, and hovering over anywhere in the gray, I'm just going to go to Control Vertex. And I might just slide these vertices out and down, and slide these up a little bit. You can see that there is some overlap in my geometry right here, and that's due to how big the circle is and how tight these points are. So I'm just going to slide some of these points down a little bit to give it a little bit more room. And you can see when I change the curve, the geometry changes as well. And if you realize you forgot to put a point, like I want this to be a little bit more rounded, you can always use your normal modeling tools, select that edge loop, and bevel it. So I now have the pipe that goes from the top to the bottom. I'm going to delete my history. Curve 1 is going to be called drain pipe curve, and the NURB circle will be pipe curve. I don't think I'll have any more curves, but I'm going to put them in a group called curves GRP for group. And I'll center my pivot, and I'll just put it off to the side. So I now have 3 walls and 3 pieces of detail. And next, even though I said that was the last one, I'm going to make this little overhang. And it's a pretty easy one to do. I'm going to hide my curves group first, so they're not in my way. And I'm going to make a sphere this time. And this one will be a little bit different than the reference just because of how how my wall is a little bit more slanted than the others. If you modeled it differently, it could be a little bit easier for you. And I'm going to delete the bottom half of the sphere and then the back part of the sphere. So I'm really just keeping the pieces that I need. And that was too much. Make sure you delete the right part of the sphere. There we go. And I'll slide it back and down. Where's my do? So it's a little bit low. I will move this up. Going to intersect a little bit. If you do want to change your wall, you would have to remake these corner pieces again, but let's say you realize you don't want it to be this slanted. You can very easily just select these top pieces and move them out to make it a little bit more vertical. And since, again, this is a detail piece, not a modular wall, you can make it a little bit bigger than the normal 2x2, and it will have enough room when you put everything together to fit. One thing that's really important to remember, that game engines don't always render the backside of models. So if I rendered this in Maya, I would see the same texture on the inside that I saw on the outside. Most game engines will render the backside as invisible. It's a little bit more efficient and easier for them to do. There are ways that you can get it to render the backside of an object. And for now, I'm going to leave it two-dimensional and hope it won't be an issue, but if it is, we can always come back and try to fix it later. So I have all my modular pieces for my first building. I'm going to name them. So this will be wall flat, and I'm going to put 1 at the end of it. Wall inside corner. Outside corner. This will be called half pillar. Window, pipe, and overhang. I'm going to put all these modular pieces in a group. They will be building 1 GRP, and have them nicely organized. I'm going to hide my reference for now. And you can definitely snap your wall pieces together, make sure everything fits. But in the next video, I'm going to go over how to do the cylindrical building.